$350 million, that's what it cost for my son to destroy me. Not just financially, though watching him vote me out of the company I built did hurt. Not just professionally, though seeing my life's work become his personal ATM was crushing. No, the real cost was watching the boy I taught to code turn into a stranger who could look me in the eye and say, "I don't need you anymore, Dad." In chess, when the king falls, the game ends. But Connor forgot something crucial. I wasn't the king in this story. I was the one who built the entire board. This tale has more reversals than a Supreme Court decision, and each twist costs millions. By the end, you'll understand why sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that save your life. Now, I know some of you are listening while commuting. Hit that subscribe button so you don't lose this story in traffic. And stick around, because in about 20 minutes, you're going to hear Connor begging me for help while wearing FBI handcuffs. My name is William Harrison, and this is how I taught my son that betraying family has a price no amount of money can pay. I thought raising my son would be simpler than rocket science. I was wrong. Connor was 8 when I first taught him to code. Sarah, my wife, was still alive then. She'd watch from the kitchen doorway as I showed him how to make the computer screen light up with simple commands. "You're building his future," she'd say. She was right, but not in the way either of us imagined. When Sarah died of cancer 8 years ago, Connor was 21, fresh out of MIT with a computer science degree and already talking about changing the world. I was 54, hollow with grief, and suddenly facing retirement from the only career I'd ever known. That's when Connor came to me with the idea. Harrison Dynamics, a robotics company focused on AI applications for medical equipment. "Dad, your NASA experience with precision robotics, plus my software skills, we could revolutionize surgical instruments." It sounded perfect. Father and son, building something meaningful together, something Sarah would have been proud of. I liquidated my NASA retirement savings, $400,000, every penny I had. Connor contributed his coding expertise and the fire of youth. We set up shop in my garage in 2019, 2 years after I'd taken early retirement to grieve my wife and figure out what came next. For 3 years we were a team. I handled the mechanical engineering, the precision calibration that NASA had drilled into my bones. Connor handled the software, the artificial intelligence that would make our surgical robots smarter than anything on the market. Our breakthrough came in 2022, a robotic surgical assistant that could adapt to a surgeon's hand movements in real time, reducing human error by 60%. The medical community took notice. That's when Victoria Sterling entered our lives. Tori, as she insisted we call her, was a senior financial advisor at Pinnacle Capital Partners. 34 years old, sharp as a scalpel with financial projections that seemed almost too perfect. She had this way of making Connor feel like the next Steve Jobs. "Your technology is revolutionary, Connor," she'd say, always addressing him first. "But you need serious capital to scale. We're talking IPO territory here." I should have paid more attention to how she never quite met my eyes when she spoke. Connor started changing after Tori came aboard. Little things at first. He'd use phrases like modern business practices and legacy thinking whenever I questioned her strategies. He'd stay late at this office for meetings I wasn't invited to. Then he met Elena Vasquez, 27, allegedly a former junior analyst at some investment firm. Beautiful, charming, and somehow instantly expert on IPO procedures despite her age. Connor was smitten within weeks. They were married within 6 months. Red flags don't always wave. Sometimes they whisper. By early 2024, Harrison Dynamics had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We'd moved from my garage to a proper office at 1247 Montgomery Street in San Francisco. We had 23 employees, 3 major contracts with hospital systems, and patents worth millions. The IPO launch was set for October 2024. Connor insisted on restructuring the company first. "For investor confidence," he said. The new structure gave him 51% control, me 49%. "I trust you completely," I told him when I signed the papers. "I know, Dad. This is just business formality." I'd spent 30 years calculating trajectories for spacecraft traveling millions of miles through the vacuum of space. But I completely miscalculated the trajectory of my own son's ambition. But that miscalculation was about to become the least of my problems. The IPO launched on October 10th, 2024. In 5 days, we raised exactly $350,247,892. Connor's face was on the cover of Tech Weekly as America's youngest AI visionary. The interviews, the accolades, the sudden wealth, it all went to his head faster than helium in a balloon. I should have seen it coming during those weeks leading up to the IPO. Connor started talking differently. "We need to pivot the company culture," he'd say. "Investor confidence requires dynamic leadership." Dynamic leadership apparently didn't include a 62-year-old former NASA engineer. The morning of October 15th, Connor called an emergency board meeting. Just him, me, and our corporate attorney, Margaret Chen. The meeting was scheduled for 2:30 p.m. at our Montgomery Street office. I arrived 5 minutes early, the way NASA had trained me. Punctuality was respect. Connor was already there with Elena and a stack of legal documents. Margaret looked uncomfortable, her usual confident demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like guilt. "Dad, we need to talk about the future direction of Harrison Dynamics," Connor began without preamble. The corporate speak should have been my first warning. "The IPO was incredibly successful," he continued, "but investors are looking for aggressive growth strategies, modern leadership approaches." Elena sat beside him, silent but supportive, her hand occasionally touching his arm in what I now realize was orchestrated encouragement. "I don't understand," I said. "Our technology is solid. Our market share is growing. What's the problem?" Connor exchanged a look with Elena. "The problem, Dad, is that your approach is too conservative. Too NASA. Too NASA. As if the precision and reliability that had put humans on the moon was somehow a liability." "Investors want to see innovation leadership," Elena chimed in. Her voice was gentle but firm. "The market demands young, dynamic vision." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What exactly are you proposing?" Connor slid a document across the conference table. "A restructuring of operational responsibilities. You'd move to an advisory role while I take full operational control." I scanned the papers. Advisory role, no decision-making authority, no access to financial accounts. Essentially, they were offering to let me keep my name on the building while stripping away everything I'd built. "Connor, we built this together. Your mother would have—" "Don't!" His voice cut sharp. "Don't bring Mom into this. This is business." "Business. When did our family legacy become just business?" Margaret Chen cleared her throat. "Mr. Harrison, with Connor holding 51%, this is technically legal. But I want to ensure you understand the implications." I understood perfectly. My son was executing a corporate coup against his own father. "I need time to think about this," I said. "Actually," Connor replied, checking his phone, "we need a decision today. The board vote is scheduled for 4 p.m., 2.5 hours to decide whether to surrender the company I'd built or fight my own son." Elena spoke up again. "Bill, this could be good for both of you. Connor gets to prove himself as an independent leader, and you get to enjoy retirement with your fair share of the IPO proceeds." Fair share. They were talking about my life's work like it was a divorce settlement. "What if I vote no?" I asked. Connor's jaw tightened. "Then we'll have to consider more drastic measures." The room went quiet. Margaret Chen looked down at her notes. Elena studied her manicured nails. Connor stared at me with eyes that looked nothing like the 8-year-old boy I'd taught to code. At 4 p.m., Connor called for the vote. 51% trumped 49%. I was officially demoted to senior advisor, with no operational authority. But as I sat in that conference room, watching my son celebrate his corporate victory, I had no idea that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. The phone call came 3 days later. "Dad?" Connor's voice sounded different, strained. "We need to talk." I was in my apartment, the same 2-bedroom place I'd lived in since Sarah died. After the board meeting, I'd started working from home. Senior advisor, it turned out, meant they didn't actually want my advice. "What's on your mind?" I kept my voice level. "It's about my position at the company. Elena thinks it would be better if I had complete autonomy. No advisory oversight. Complete autonomy. They wanted me gone entirely." "I see," I said. "And what do you think?" A pause, then, "I think she's right. This is my company now, Dad. I don't need you holding me back." Holding him back. The precision engineering that had made our surgical robots the most accurate in the industry was apparently holding him back. "Connor, I helped build this company. I put everything I had into it. And I'm grateful for that, but gratitude doesn't mean I should sacrifice my vision for your comfort zone. Sacrifice his vision, as if innovation and reliability were mutually exclusive. You're making a mistake, I said quietly. The only mistake I made was waiting this long. I should have done this right after the IPO. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Connor's voice came back, harder than before. I'm calling an emergency shareholder meeting for tomorrow morning. Margaret will send you the paperwork tonight. This time, we're not just restructuring responsibilities. We're restructuring ownership. They were going to try to force me out completely. That's not legally possible without my consent. Actually, Dad, you might want to read the fine print on those incorporation papers you signed last year. There's a clause about operational disputes and company direction. Fine print. The incorporation papers I'd signed when I trusted my son completely. Elena helped me understand the legal options, Connor continued. Turns out, we have more flexibility than you might think. Elena, the woman who'd appeared in our lives like a solution looking for a problem. Connor, stop and think about what you're doing. This isn't just about business. This is about family. Family doesn't pay investor dividends, Dad. This is 2024, not 1994. Your mother and I raised you better than this. My mother is dead. His voice turned ice cold, and her values died with her. I felt something break inside my chest, not just hurt, something deeper. The recognition that the son I'd raised, the boy I'd taught to code in our kitchen, might already be gone. Fine, I said. Send me the paperwork. Dad, I hope you understand this isn't personal. But as I hung up the phone, I knew it was the most personal thing Connor had ever done to me. The emergency meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. the next morning, October 19th. Margaret Chen's overnight package contained 47 pages of legal documents, all designed to transfer my remaining shares to Connor for fair market compensation. Fair market compensation turned out to be $2.3 million, for a company that had just raised $350 million. I spent that night doing what NASA had trained me to do, analyzing the problem from every angle. The corporate structure, the legal implications, the voting mechanics. By dawn, I understood exactly what Connor was attempting. It was brilliant in a ruthless sort of way. Use the post-IPO voting structure to isolate me, then force a buyout at pre-IPO valuation. I'd walk away with enough money to retire comfortably, while Connor kept control of a company now worth hundreds of millions. The meeting lasted 37 minutes. Connor presented his case with PowerPoint slides and financial projections. Elena sat beside him, occasionally nodding supportive encouragement. Margaret Chen explained the legal framework with obvious discomfort. When it came time to vote, I looked across the conference table at my son. He was wearing a navy suit I'd never seen before, expensive looking. His wedding ring caught the morning light. "Any final questions before we proceed?" he asked. "Just one," I said. "Do you really think your mother would be proud of this moment?" For just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Doubt, maybe, or regret. Then Elena touched his arm, and the moment passed. "Motion to approve the ownership restructuring," Connor said. "Seconded," Elena replied, even though she had no legal standing to do so. 51% voted yes. The company I'd built was officially no longer mine. But as I walked out of that conference room for the last time, I didn't know that Connor had just signed his own arrest warrant. The call came from Agent Jennifer Walsh of the FBI Financial Crimes Division at 7:43 a.m. on November 2nd, exactly 2 weeks after Connor had forced me out of Harrison Dynamics. "Mr. Harrison, this is Agent Walsh. I need to speak with you about your former company. Can you come to our San Francisco field office this morning?" Former company. The word still stung. "What's this concerning?" I asked. "Harrison Dynamics is under federal investigation for potential money laundering activities. We believe you may have information that could assist our inquiry." Money laundering. I sat down hard on my kitchen chair. "Agent Walsh, I can assure you that Harrison Dynamics is a legitimate robotics company. Our technology, our contracts, everything is completely above board." "Sir, we're not questioning the legitimacy of your technology. We're questioning the source of your IPO funding. The source of our IPO funding. Pinnacle Capital Partners. Victoria Sterling's too perfect financial projections." "I'll be there in an hour," I said. The FBI field office at 450 Golden Gate Avenue was nothing like the sleek tech offices I'd grown accustomed to. Government gray walls, fluorescent lighting, and the smell of stale coffee and bureaucracy. Agent Walsh was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of sharp intelligence in her eyes that reminded me of NASA mission controllers. She wore her badge number 2851 clipped to a black blazer. "Mr. Harrison, thank you for coming in voluntarily. Can you tell me about your relationship with Pinnacle Capital Partners?" I explained how Tori Sterling had approached us, how she'd managed our IPO process, how professional and competent she'd seemed. "Did you ever question her financial projections?" Agent Walsh asked. "They seemed optimistic, but not impossibly so. Our technology really was that innovative." Agent Walsh slid a manila folder across the metal table. "Mr. Harrison, take a look at these wire transfer records." The documents showed a series of transfers totaling $350,247,892, our exact IPO amount, flowing from something called Baltic Holdings LLC through a network of shell companies before landing in our Harrison Dynamics accounts. Baltic Holdings is a known money laundering front for Eastern European cryptocurrency cartels, Agent Walsh explained. They've been washing dirty money through legitimate IPO investments for the past 18 months. I stared at the numbers, my engineer's mind automatically tracking the flow of funds. "You're saying our IPO money came from criminals?" "We're saying Pinnacle Capital Partners has been using companies like yours as unknowing shells to legitimize criminal proceeds." "But Connor had no idea." "Sir, that's what we're trying to determine. How much did your son know about Pinnacle's activities?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Connor, with his new suits and sudden confidence. Elena, with her instant expertise on IPO procedures. Tori Sterling, with her two perfect financial models. "Agent Walsh, if what you're saying is true, then my son is a victim here, not a criminal." She studied me for a moment. "Mr. Harrison, did you know that Elena Vasquez, your son's wife, was employed by Pinnacle Capital Partners for 6 months, immediately before meeting your son?" The room felt suddenly cold. "That's impossible. Elena told us she worked for a different investment firm." Agent Walsh pulled out another document. Employment records. Elena Vasquez, Junior Financial Analyst, Pinnacle Capital Partners. Start date, January 2024. End date, April 2024. She quit just weeks before Connor met her. "We believe Miss Vasquez was planted to influence your son's decision-making, to ensure Harrison Dynamics would accept Pinnacle's IPO management. Planted. Like a spy in a mission I hadn't known we were running. How long has this investigation been active?" 18 months. Harrison Dynamics wasn't our primary target initially. You were just one of several companies Pinnacle was using. But when your IPO raised over $350 million, you became our biggest case. I thought about Connor's increasing paranoia over the past few months. His secretive phone calls, his sudden marriage to Elena. "Agent Walsh, what happens now?" "That depends on your son's level of cooperation. If he genuinely didn't know about Pinnacle's criminal connections, he might avoid prosecution. But if we find evidence that he was aware of the money laundering..." She didn't need to finish. Federal money laundering charges carried 20-year prison sentences. I walked out of that FBI office with a choice to make: protect my son who had betrayed me, or let justice take its course. But the numbers don't lie. And Agent Walsh was about to prove that Connor's betrayal was bigger than either of us had imagined. I spent the next 3 days learning about federal asset forfeiture procedures, RICO statutes, and something called willful blindness, a legal concept that could land Connor in federal prison, even if he claimed ignorance about Pinnacle's criminal activities. The irony wasn't lost on me. Connor had pushed me out to gain complete control of the company, and now that control might be what destroyed him. Agent Walsh called on November 6th with an update that changed everything. "Mr. Harrison, we've received authorization to freeze Harrison Dynamics corporate accounts pending our investigation. I'm calling because we need your technical expertise." "My technical expertise. Your son changed all the administrative passwords and encryption codes after your departure. We can't access the company's original development files or financial records without triggering a data destruction protocol." Connor had locked me out so completely that now the FBI couldn't get in either. Agent Walsh, I'm not sure I can help. Connor has full administrative control now. Actually, sir, that's where you're wrong. According to the original patent filings from 2018 and 2019, you're listed as the primary inventor on 17 critical technologies. That gives you certain legal rights to access developmental data, even after ownership transfer. Patent rights. Patent. The foundation of intellectual property law that Connor had apparently forgotten about in his rush to push me out. What exactly are you asking me to do? We need to prove that Harrison Dynamics' core technology was developed legitimately before Pinnacle Capital's involvement. If we can demonstrate that your innovations predated the criminal funding, we might be able to separate the legitimate business from the money laundering operation. In other words, I could save the company by proving Connor was telling the truth about our technology's origins. Or I could let him face the consequences of the choices he'd made. There's something else, Agent Walsh continued. We've been monitoring Pinnacle's communications since September. I think you should hear this. She played an audio recording, Tori Sterling's voice, crisp and professional, talking to someone whose accent sounded vaguely Eastern European. The Harrison deal is locked in. The kid thinks he's Steve Jobs now, so he'll do whatever we suggest. The father was getting suspicious, but Connor handled that problem by forcing him out. The father was getting suspicious. They'd seen me as a threat. Once we have full control of the company structure, Tori continued, we can process the entire $350 million through their accounts. Medical robotics is perfect cover high-value transactions, international sales, complex supply chains. Perfect cover. My life's work reduced to criminal camouflage. The recordings go on for 47 minutes, Agent Walsh said. At no point do they express concern about Connor discovering their activities. If anything, they seem confident he'll cooperate as long as they keep feeding his ego. Feeding his ego. Elena's constant praise, Tori's visionary language, the tech magazine covers, all designed to make Connor feel important enough to ignore red flags. Agent Walsh, do you believe my son knew about the money laundering? Honestly, I think your son was a perfect mark. Young, ambitious, isolated from experienced advisors. They knew exactly which buttons to push. Isolated from experienced advisors. They'd turned Connor against me not just for control, but to eliminate the one person who might have spotted their game. What's my role in all this? That's up to you, Mr. Harrison. You can help us prove your son's innocence by demonstrating the legitimate origins of your technology, or you can step back and let federal prosecutors make their own determinations about his guilt. I had 48 hours to decide whether to save the son who had betrayed me. That night, I sat in my apartment with a bottle of whiskey Sarah had given me for our 20th anniversary. I'd been saving it for a special occasion that never came. The bottle was still sealed when my phone rang at 11:34 p.m. Dad? Connor's voice was barely a whisper. Connor, I think I made a mistake. A big mistake. For the first time in months, he sounded like the boy I'd raised instead of the CEO he'd become. What kind of mistake? The FBI came to the office today. They're asking questions about Pinnacle Capital, about the IPO funding. Dad, what if the money wasn't clean? What if? As if he was just now considering the possibility that his perfect IPO had been too good to be true. Connor, are you asking for my help? A long pause. Then, I'm asking for your forgiveness. Those are two different things. I know. But Dad, if this gets bad, if there are criminal charges, you're the only person who knows enough about our original technology to prove we built something legitimate. The only person. Suddenly my expertise was valuable again. You want me to help you after you threw me out of my own company? I want you to help me because I'm your son. I looked at Sarah's photo on my kitchen table. What would she want me to do? Connor, I'll think about it. But even as I hung up, I knew Connor was about to learn that some betrayals can't be undone. They can only be paid for. The knock on my door came at 2:30 a.m. on November 8th. Connor stood in my hallway wearing wrinkled clothes and an expression I hadn't seen since he was 12 and had broken Sarah's favorite vase. Dad, can I come in? I stepped aside. He looked around my small apartment like he was seeing it for the first time. The modest furniture, the NASA commendation plaques on the wall, the life of a man who'd never cared much about material wealth. You want coffee? I asked. I don't think I'll sleep tonight anyway. As I made coffee, Connor sat at my kitchen table. The same table where I'd taught him to code 17 years ago. The irony was sharp enough to cut steel. "Elena left me," he said without preamble. I handed him a mug. "When?" "This morning, right after the FBI agents left our house. She had divorce papers ready to go, like she'd been expecting this. Because she probably had. Connor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. How much did you know about Pinnacle Capital's background?" He stared into his coffee. "I thought I knew everything. Tori showed me their portfolio, their success rate with tech IPOs. Everything looked legitimate. Did you ever verify their claims independently?" Elena said that would show distrust, that successful partnerships required good faith. Good faith. Elena had played him perfectly. "Dad, there's something else. The FBI agents asked about our encryption protocols, about access to the original development servers. What did you tell them?" "I told them you'd changed all the passwords when you left." I set down my coffee cup hard enough to rattle the table. "Connor, I never changed anything. You changed the passwords to lock me out." His face went pale. "But Elena said, she told me you'd locked down the servers as a security precaution, that it was standard practice for departing executives." Elena again, feeding him lies that justified their lockout while setting me up to look vindictive. "Connor, those servers contain 4 years of development history, patent applications, prototype designs, testing data, everything we'd need to prove our technology was legitimate. Can you get back in?" I studied my son's face. 3 weeks ago, he'd forced me out of my own company. Now he was begging for my help to save it. "I can, but first you need to understand what this means. If I help the FBI access those servers, I'm not just saving the company. I'm choosing to save you." "What's the alternative?" "The alternative is that you face federal money laundering charges without the evidence to prove your innocence." Connor's hands were shaking as he reached for his coffee cup. "How bad could it get?" 20 years in federal prison. Asset forfeiture of everything connected to the company. Complete destruction of your professional reputation. 20 years. The full weight of his choices was finally hitting him. "Dad, I'm sorry. About everything. About forcing you out. About questioning your methods. About choosing Elena's advice over your experience." "Sorry doesn't unring the bell, Connor." "I know. But please help me fix this." I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the San Francisco skyline. Somewhere out there was the office building where I'd spent 5 years building something I was proud of, where Connor had spent 5 months destroying it. If I do this, there are conditions. Anything. First, you're going to publicly acknowledge that you made a mistake forcing me out. Not corporate speak, a real apology. Done. Second, if we survive this legal nightmare, you're going to restructure the company ownership back to our original 50-50 partnership. Done. Third, Elena goes. Completely. Divorce, separation, whatever it takes. She never steps foot in Harrison Dynamics again. Connor nodded. She's already filing divorce papers. Apparently she's claiming I misrepresented my financial stability. Misrepresented his financial stability. Even in divorce, Elena was playing victim. There's one more condition, Connor. This isn't negotiable. What? You're going to learn how to run a business with integrity instead of ego. You're going to listen to experience instead of dismissing it as legacy thinking. And you're going to earn back the trust you shattered. For the first time in months, Connor looked me in the eye. How do I do that? By proving you understand that building something worthwhile takes time, precision, and respect for the people who came before you. I pulled out my phone and called Agent Walsh. Agent Walsh, this is Bill Harrison. I'm ready to help you access those servers. Excellent. Can you meet us at the Harrison Dynamics office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.? We'll be there. After I hung up, Connor looked at me with something approaching hope. We? Connor, you're still the CEO. This is still your company, at least on paper. But from now on, we do this together. For the first time in months, I saw a glimpse of the boy I'd raised. But as we shook hands across my kitchen table, neither of us knew that our problems with Pinnacle Capital were just beginning. The Harrison Dynamics office felt like a crime scene when we arrived the next morning. FBI agents had cordoned off the server room with yellow tape. Financial documents were spread across conference tables like evidence in a murder trial. Agent Walsh met us in the lobby with 2 other agents and a computer forensics specialist. Mr. Harrison, we appreciate your cooperation. Before we proceed, I need to make something clear to both of you. Anything we find on these servers could be used as evidence in federal prosecution. Do you both understand that? Connor looked at me. I nodded. We understand, I said. The server room was exactly as I'd left it 3 weeks ago, except for the new passwords Connor had implemented. As I sat down at the primary terminal, muscle memory kicked in. 30 years of NASA's cybersecurity protocols had trained me to think like a hacker when necessary. Connor, when you changed the passwords, did you use your usual patterns? He looked embarrassed. Elena suggested using her mother's maiden name combined with our wedding date. Elena again. Even the passwords had been her idea. It took me 17 minutes to regain administrative access. The FBI forensic specialist watched over my shoulder as 4 years of development history populated on the screens. Mr. Harrison, Agent Walsh said, can you walk us through the timeline of your core innovations? I pulled up our original patent applications from 2018. This is our first breakthrough, the adaptive motion calibration system, filed 8 months before we ever heard of Pinnacle Capital. The forensic specialist tagged the files with official evidence markers. Here's our surgical precision protocol from 2019, I continued, and our AI learning algorithm from early 2020. Everything that makes Harrison Dynamics valuable was created before Tori Sterling entered our lives. Connor stood behind me, watching as I reconstructed the legitimate origins of our company. For the first time, I think he truly understood how much work had gone into building what he'd almost destroyed. Agent Walsh, I said, there's something else you should see. I accessed our financial records from before the IPO. Clean development funding, transparent contractor payments, detailed expense reports that any accountant could verify. Compare this to our post-IPO accounts, I said, pulling up the recent records. The difference was stark. Pre-IPO, methodical, traceable, conservative. Post-IPO, massive transfers, complex international transactions, shell company payments. Mr. Harrison, Agent Walsh said to Connor, did you approve these international transfers? Connor studied the screen. Elena handled most of the post-IPO financial management. She said it was standard practice for companies of our size. Standard practice. The lies kept getting bigger. Agent Walsh pulled out a tablet and showed us surveillance photos. Tori Sterling meeting with known criminals. Elena Vasquez at what appeared to be a Pinnacle Capital strategy session. Your wife attended planning meetings where they discussed using Harrison Dynamics as a money laundering vehicle, Agent Walsh told Connor. She wasn't just planted to influence you. She was there to actively facilitate the criminal operation. Connor sat down hard in a desk chair. How long have you known this? We've been building this case for 18 months. Harrison Dynamics wasn't our target. You were victims. But when your IPO became their biggest money laundering operation, you became our most important evidence. I looked at my son. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a celebrated tech visionary. Now he was learning that his entire recent success had been orchestrated by criminals. What happens now? Connor asked. Now you're going to help us catch them, Agent Walsh replied. She explained the FBI's plan. Connor would continue acting as CEO, while wearing a wire to record his interactions with Tori Sterling. They wanted evidence of her admitting to the money laundering scheme. Is that safe? I asked. We'll have agents positioned nearby, but Mr. Harrison, Tori doesn't know we're onto her yet. She still thinks Connor is under her influence. Connor looked at me. Dad, what do you think? For months, Connor had dismissed my judgment in favor of Elena's manipulation. Now he was asking for my advice again. I think you owe it to every legitimate company Pinnacle has destroyed to help stop them. Agent Walsh handed Connor a wire device smaller than a button. Call Tori Sterling and arrange a meeting. Tell her you're concerned about FBI attention and need reassurance about your financial backing. Connor made the call while we listened. His voice sounded natural, concerned, but not panicked. Tori, it's Connor. Can we meet today? I'm getting some pressure from federal investigators and I need to understand our legal exposure. Of course, Connor. Don't worry. This kind of scrutiny is normal for successful IPOs. Meet me at our usual spot at 3 p.m. Their usual spot turned out to be a private dining room at an upscale restaurant in Palo Alto. Agent Walsh positioned surveillance teams at 3 nearby locations. Connor, I said as he prepared to leave, remember what NASA taught me about high-risk missions. Stay calm, follow the plan, and trust your team. Dad, what if she realizes I'm wearing a wire? Then you remember that you're not just Connor Harrison, tech CEO. You're Connor Harrison, son of a NASA engineer, and we don't abandon missions. As Connor walked into that restaurant to confront the woman who'd manipulated him for months, neither of us knew that Tori Sterling was about to reveal something that would change everything we thought we understood about the case. The wire transmission crackled through Agent Walsh's earpiece as Connor sat down across from Tori Sterling at 3:17 p.m. I was positioned in the FBI surveillance van 2 blocks away, listening to my son walk into what might be the most dangerous conversation of his life. Connor, you look stressed, Tori's voice came through clearly. Tell me what's bothering you. The FBI came to our office yesterday. They're asking questions about Pinnacle's funding sources. That's completely normal post-IPO scrutiny. Nothing to worry about. Agent Walsh leaned forward. Tori was being careful, not admitting anything yet. Connor pressed forward according to script. But they specifically mentioned money laundering investigations. Tori, I need to know, is there anything about our IPO funding that could create legal problems? A pause, then Tori's laugh, sharp and confident. Connor, you're being paranoid. Pinnacle Capital has managed hundreds of IPOs. We're completely legitimate. But what about the wire transfers from Baltic Holdings? The FBI seems to think... Connor. Tori's voice turned serious. Who told you about Baltic Holdings? Agent Walsh cursed under her breath. That wasn't in the script. The FBI mentioned it during questioning. Connor improvised. Another pause. Longer this time. Connor, I think you and I need to have a more honest conversation. About your father, about your wife, and about your future. My blood went cold. What about my father? Your father was asking too many questions about our financial projections. Questions that could have jeopardized not just your IPO, but some very important business relationships. What kind of business relationships? The kind that don't appreciate excessive scrutiny from former NASA engineers with security clearances. Security clearances. They'd researched my background thoroughly. Tori, I don't understand what you're saying. I'm saying your father's removal from the company wasn't just Elena's idea. It was a business necessity. Agent Walsh was typing frantically on her laptop, probably authorizing additional backup units. You wanted me to force out my father? Connor, your father would have discovered that Pinnacle Capital serves clients who prefer anonymity. Clients who invest very large amounts of money without the paperwork that American financial institutions typically require. There it was. The admission we needed. Are you talking about illegal money? Tori's laugh was different now, colder. I'm talking about international clients who have privacy needs that American regulations don't always accommodate. Jesus, Tori, are you saying you laundered money through my company? I'm saying Harrison Dynamics provided an excellent vehicle for converting certain funds into legitimate American assets. Your innovative technology gave us perfect cover for high-value transactions. Agent Walsh was speaking rapidly into her radio, calling for immediate arrest teams. How much money are we talking about? Connor asked. Connor, your IPO was just the beginning. We have another $200 million waiting to be processed through Harrison Dynamics over the next 6 months. $200 million more. This wasn't just about our IPO. They were planning to use our company as a permanent money laundering operation. What about Elena? How much did she know? Elena was essential to the operation. She made sure you stayed focused on the technology while we handled the financial structure. She also ensured your father was isolated and eventually removed. Connor's voice wavered slightly. She was working for you the whole time? Connor, Elena is one of our most effective assets. She's been placed in 3 other tech companies over the past 2 years. Your marriage was professional. Professional. They'd destroyed my son's family life as casually as they'd stolen our company. What happens now? Connor asked. Now you continue being the brilliant CEO everyone thinks you are, while we continue using Harrison Dynamics for our clients' investment needs. Or what? Or we might have to consider you a security risk, like your father was. Security risk. Security. Agent Walsh was already out of the van, heading toward the restaurant. Are you threatening me? Connor, I'm explaining reality. Our clients invested $350 million in your company. They expect returns on that investment. If you become difficult, you'll what? Kill me? We'll make you disappear the same way we would have made your father disappear if he'd stayed involved. Agent Walsh burst through the restaurant door with 3 other agents. I could hear the commotion through Connor's wire. "Victoria Sterling, FBI, you're under arrest?" Chairs scraped, voices shouted, then Connor's voice, shaky but clear. "Dad, if you're listening, I'm okay, and I'm sorry about everything." 20 minutes later, Connor walked out of that restaurant in handcuffs alongside Tori Sterling. "Standard procedure," Agent Walsh explained. They needed to arrest him to maintain the illusion that he wasn't cooperating in case Pinnacle had other assets watching. But as I watched my son being led to a federal vehicle, I realized our nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. Agent Walsh approached me as the surveillance van prepared to leave. "Mr. Harrison, we got everything we needed. Sterling admitted to money laundering, conspiracy, and made what sounds like threats against both you and your son." "What about Connor?" "He'll be released tomorrow morning. Officially, he's being held as a material witness. Unofficially, he's in protective custody." "Protective custody?" "Mr. Harrison, Pinnacle Capital's clients don't like loose ends. Your son just became the star witness in a case that could expose a $2 billion international money laundering network." $2 billion? We'd thought we were fighting for our small company. We were actually fighting for our lives. What do we do now? Now you both disappear until the trial. New identities, federal protection, the works. As the FBI van drove through San Francisco traffic, I realized that Connor's betrayal had led us into something far more dangerous than family drama. We weren't just trying to save our company anymore. We were trying to survive. Recalibrated narrative pacing and condensed upcoming scene structure. I need to condense this significantly. Federal protective custody turned out to be a safe house in Daly City, a nondescript 2-bedroom apartment with bulletproof windows and agents rotating in 8-hour shifts. Connor and I sat across from each other at a government-issued kitchen table, the same way we'd sat in my apartment 3 nights ago. Everything was different now. "Dad, Agent Walsh says the trial could take months. That's if we survive long enough to testify." Connor flinched. "Do you really think they'd try to kill us?" "Connor, you just helped the FBI record evidence that could destroy a $2 billion criminal network. What do you think?" He stared at his hands. 29 years old, and he was finally understanding that actions have consequences. "I keep thinking about Mom," he said quietly, "about what she'd say if she could see what I did to us." "Your mother would say that admitting mistakes is the first step toward fixing them." "Can this be fixed?" I studied my son's face. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement had been replaced by something that looked like genuine remorse. "That depends on what you're willing to do. Anything. Name it. Connor, if we survive this trial, if we somehow get our company back, I have conditions. I already agreed to everything you asked. Those were just the beginning." I pulled out a legal pad and began writing. After 30 years at NASA, I'd learned to document important agreements. First, you're going to testify not just about Pinnacle's crimes, but about your own choices. The board meeting, forcing me out, refusing to listen to experience, all of it. "You want me to publicly humiliate myself?" "I want you to publicly take responsibility." Connor nodded slowly. "What else?" "Second, if Harrison Dynamics survives this, you're going to rebuild it the right way. No shortcuts, no ego-driven decisions, no dismissing wisdom as legacy thinking. And third, you're going to learn the difference between being a leader and being a boss. Leaders serve their people. Bosses serve themselves." Connor was quiet for a long moment. Through the safe house windows, I could see Agent Walsh talking to 2 other agents in the parking lot. "Dad, what if the company doesn't survive? What if the criminal investigation destroys everything? Then we start over. Together." "You'd do that? After what I did to you?" "Connor, you're still my son, but trust has to be earned back." Agent Walsh knocked on the door and entered without waiting for permission. "Gentlemen, we have a problem." She sat down at our kitchen table and spread out several photographs. Surveillance images of men in expensive suits watching our safe house from various locations around the neighborhood. "Pinnacle's clients have found you. We're moving you to a new location tonight." "How?" Connor asked. "Someone leaked your location. We're investigating internally, but right now, our priority is keeping you alive until trial." I studied the surveillance photos, professional operators with the kind of patient discipline that suggested military training. Agent Walsh, what's our timeline for the trial? Federal prosecutor wants to move fast. Pre-trial hearings start next week. Next week, 7 days to prepare testimony that would either destroy a criminal network or get us killed. There's something else, Agent Walsh continued. Elena Vasquez wants to cut a deal. She's offering to testify against Pinnacle in exchange for immunity. Elena, Connor's face went white. What kind of testimony? Everything. How they targeted Harrison Dynamics, how they manipulated Connor, how they planned to use your company for permanent money laundering operations. Connor looked at me. What do you think? I think your wife is about to teach you one final lesson about trust. Agent Walsh packed up her photographs. Pack light. We're leaving in 20 minutes. But as we prepared to disappear into federal protection, none of us knew that Connor was about to face the hardest choice of his life. The new safe house was a cabin in the Santa Cruz Mountains, 47 miles from civilization and surrounded by federal agents who looked like they'd rather be hunting terrorists than babysitting witnesses. Elena's immunity deal went through on November 15th. Agent Walsh called with the details while Connor and I were eating government-provided takeout Chinese food. She's giving us everything, Agent Walsh said over speakerphone. Names, dates, financial records, operational details. Connor, your wife documented Pinnacle's entire money laundering operation. Ex-wife, Connor corrected quietly. Elena kept records of her activities? Detailed records. Apparently she was concerned about being abandoned by Pinnacle if the operation went bad. Honor among thieves. Elena had been planning her exit strategy from the beginning. What does she want in return? I asked. Full immunity, witness protection, and $50,000 relocation assistance. $50,000 to start a new life after destroying ours. Connor, Agent Walsh continued, Elena's testimony will be crucial for the prosecution, but there's something you need to understand. When she testifies, she's going to detail exactly how she manipulated you. Every conversation, every lie, every moment of your relationship. Connor set down his chopsticks. What do you mean? She's going to describe your marriage as a professional assignment, how she was instructed to make you fall in love with her, how she pushed you to remove your father, how she reported your decisions back to Pinnacle. Professional assignment. The woman Connor had loved, had married, had trusted with his future. She'd been acting the entire time. Agent Walsh, I said, is Connor required to be present during Elena's testimony? He'll be in the courtroom for the entire trial. Federal witnesses don't get to hide from uncomfortable truths. After Agent Walsh hung up, Connor walked out onto the cabin's deck. I found him 20 minutes later, staring at the forest like it held answers. Dad, how do you rebuild your life when you realize none of it was real? One piece at a time, starting with the truth. What truth? That you chose ego over wisdom, that you chose a stranger over family, that you chose shortcuts over integrity. Connor turned to face me. Are you trying to make me feel worse? I'm trying to make you understand why it happened. Elena didn't destroy your judgment, Connor. She exploited weaknesses that were already there. What weaknesses? Your need to prove you were better than your old man. Your belief that success meant rejecting everything I'd taught you. Connor leaned against the deck railing. I thought I was modernizing the company. You thought you were escaping my shadow. But Connor, I wasn't your competition. I was your foundation. For the first time since this nightmare began, Connor's eyes filled with tears. How do I fix this? By testifying honestly, by taking responsibility, by understanding that rebuilding trust takes longer than destroying it. What if we lose everything? What if Harrison Dynamics is destroyed in the trial? Then we start over with something more valuable than money. What's more valuable than money? Integrity. The knowledge that we told the truth no matter the cost. Connor was quiet for a long time. Then, Dad, after Elena testifies about our marriage, about how she played me, how do I face that kind of humiliation? The same way I faced being thrown out of my own company, with dignity. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Connor, you're about to find out what you're really made of. Agent Walsh appeared at the cabin door. Gentlemen, trial starts Monday morning. Time to find out if justice still works in America. But as we prepared for the trial that would determine our future, none of us knew that Elena's testimony was about to reveal the biggest twist of all. orchestrated narrative expansion to meet word count requirements. The federal courthouse in San Francisco felt like a cathedral of justice, all marble columns and solemn dignity. Connor and I sat behind the prosecutor's table, watching Elena Vasquez take the oath on November 20th. She looked different, professional, composed, nothing like the loving wife who'd convinced Connor to betray his father. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Martinez began the questioning with surgical precision. Ms. Vasquez, please describe your employment history with Pinnacle Capital Partners. I was hired in January 2024 as a financial analyst specializing in target acquisition and relationship management. Target acquisition. They'd turned destroying families into corporate terminology. What does relationship management mean in this context? Elena's voice remained steady. My job was to form personal relationships with key decision makers at target companies, to influence their choices in ways that benefited Pinnacle's money laundering operations. And Harrison Dynamics was one of these targets? Yes, Connor Harrison was identified as an ideal mark in March 2024. Mark. Connor flinched beside me like he'd been slapped. What made Mr. Harrison an ideal mark? He was young, ambitious, and had complicated feelings about his father's authority. Our psychological profile indicated he could be manipulated through ego validation and generational conflict. Psychological profile. They'd studied my son like a lab rat. Ms. Vasquez, did you enter into a romantic relationship with Mr. Harrison as part of this assignment? Yes. I was instructed to make him fall in love with me, then marry him to gain maximum influence over his decision-making. Connor's breathing became shallow. Every conversation, every intimate moment, every declaration of love, all calculated manipulation. How did you convince Mr. Harrison to remove his father from the company? I consistently reinforced his insecurities about being seen as dependent on his father. I praised his vision while criticizing his father's outdated approach. I made him believe that forcing out his father would prove his independence and attract investor confidence. ADA Martinez approached the witness stand. Miss Vasquez, in your professional opinion, did Mr. Harrison genuinely love you? Elena looked directly at Connor for the first time. Yes, he was completely devoted. That devotion made him easy to control. Easy to control. Connor's hands were shaking. Did you ever feel guilt about deceiving him? I felt some sympathy, but Connor's ego made him complicit in his own manipulation. He wanted to believe he was a visionary so badly that he ignored obvious red flags. What red flags? My instant expertise on IPO procedures, my quick integration into his business decisions, my consistent advice to isolate his father. A more careful person would have questioned these things. The prosecutor showed Elena a series of documents. Are these reports you filed with Pinnacle Capital about your relationship with Mr. Harrison? Yes. Weekly reports detailing his emotional state, business decisions, and level of trust in my advice. Please read the report dated August 15, 2024. Elena's voice remained clinical. Subject shows increasing confidence in my business judgment. Father's influence continues to diminish. Recommend accelerating timeline for ownership restructuring. Subject's emotional attachment to me now strong enough to override family loyalty. Override family loyalty. They'd weaponized Connor's love to destroy our relationship. Miss Vasquez, did you ever genuinely care for Mr. Harrison? Elena paused, the first crack in her professional composure. He's not a bad person. Just weak, easily flattered. I sometimes felt sorry for him. Sorry for him. Connor stood up abruptly and walked out of the courtroom. I found him in the hallway 20 minutes later, sitting on a bench with his head in his hands. Connor. Dad. She kept weekly reports about how much I loved her, about how easily she could manipulate me. I know. She never loved me, not for 1 second. Our entire marriage was an assignment. Connor, what matters now is what you do with this knowledge. He looked up at me. What do you mean? You can let this destroy you, or you can use it to become stronger, wiser, more careful about who you trust. How do I ever trust anyone again? You start by trusting yourself to make better choices. ADA Martinez appeared in the hallway. Mr. Harrison, we need your testimony now. Connor stood up slowly. What do I say? The truth, all of it. How Elena manipulated you, how you betrayed me, how you almost destroyed everything we built. Why would I humiliate myself like that? Because sometimes public humiliation is the price of private redemption. Connor walked back into that courtroom and spent 3 hours detailing every mistake he'd made, every warning he'd ignored, every moment when pride had overruled wisdom. When he finished, the judge asked, "Mr. Harrison, do you accept responsibility for your choices regardless of Miss Vasquez's manipulation?" "Yes, Your Honor. I chose ego over family. I chose shortcuts over integrity. I nearly destroyed everything my father built because I wanted to prove I was better than him." "And what have you learned from this experience?" Connor looked at me. "I learned that respect isn't inherited. It's earned, and I have a lot of earning to do." But as Connor stepped down from the witness stand, neither of us knew that justice would come with a price neither of us expected. The verdict came down on December 3rd, after 4 days of jury deliberation. Victoria Sterling, guilty on all counts. Elena Vasquez, immunity granted in exchange for cooperation. Various Pinnacle Capital executives, guilty of conspiracy, money laundering, and racketeering. Connor and I sat in the front row as Judge Patricia Morrison read the sentences. Sterling got 25 years federal prison. The others received terms ranging from 8 to 15 years. But when it came to Connor's fate, the courtroom went silent. "Mr. Harrison," Judge Morrison said, "you've presented a unique case. While you were clearly manipulated, your cooperation with criminal enterprises, however unknowing, resulted in $350 million being laundered through your company." Connor stood. I could see his hands trembling. "The court recognizes your cooperation with federal investigators and your genuine remorse. However, the law requires consequences for enabling money laundering operations, regardless of intent." My heart stopped. "Therefore, this court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole in 5 years, contingent on continued cooperation and restitution." 8 years. Connor's legs gave out, and he sank back into his chair. Agent Walsh leaned over to whisper in my ear, "It could have been 20. The judge was lenient. My son was going to prison, and they called it lenient. Judge Morrison wasn't finished. "Mr. Harrison, before sentencing is finalized, this court wants to address your relationship with your father." Connor looked confused. "Your father could have let you face these charges alone. Instead, he chose to help prove your innocence of the more serious accusations. He risked his own safety to testify on your behalf." Connor turned to look at me. "Mr. Harrison, do you understand the significance of your father's choice?" "Yes, Your Honor. And do you understand that forgiveness is not the same as trust?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Then this court hopes you will use your incarceration to become worthy of both." After the hearing, Connor and I had 30 minutes before federal marshals would transport him to begin his sentence. "Dad, I'm sorry about everything." "I know. Will you write to me?" I looked at my son, 29 years old, convicted felon, about to spend the next 8 years paying for his choices. "Connor, I'll write, but not immediately." "What do you mean?" "I mean you need to spend some time understanding who you are without anyone else influencing your decisions. No Elena, no Tori, no me, just you, facing the consequences of your choices." "How long?" "When you can write me a letter that doesn't make excuses, doesn't blame anyone else, and shows me you understand the difference between regret and responsibility, then we'll talk." Connor nodded. "What about Harrison Dynamics?" "Harrison Dynamics is finished. The criminal investigation destroyed our reputation, but I'm starting something new." "What?" "Harrison Tech Solutions, an employee-owned company that builds assistive robotics for veterans, people who understand sacrifice and service." "That sounds like Mom would have approved." "Your mother would have approved of a lot of things you chose not to do." Federal Marshal Rodriguez approached us. "Time to go, Mr. Harrison." Connor hugged me for the first time in 2 years. "Dad, thank you for saving me." "Connor, I didn't save you. I gave you a chance to save yourself." As I watched federal marshals lead my son away in handcuffs, I thought about justice. Real justice isn't revenge, it's consequence. It's learning. It's the opportunity to become better than you were. 3 months later, I received a letter from Federal Correctional Institution Dublin. Connor's handwriting, but different somehow, more careful. "Dad," it began, "I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm writing to tell you I finally understand what you tried to teach me about building things that last. In here, I met a man who spent 40 years as a steelworker. He told me something you would appreciate. Son, you can't build anything worthwhile on a foundation of lies and ego. The letter continued for 3 pages. No excuses, no self-pity, just acknowledgement of choices and consequences. At the bottom, he'd written, I love you, Dad, not because I need something from you, but because you never gave up on teaching me right from wrong, even when I refused to learn. I wrote back that afternoon. Harrison Tech Solutions now employs 47 people, including 12 veterans and 3 former NASA engineers. We're building robotic prosthetics for wounded warriors technology that serves people instead of profits. Sometimes I think about Elena, living somewhere under federal protection with a new identity. Sometimes I wonder if Tori Sterling thinks about the families she destroyed while serving her 25-year sentence. But mostly, I think about second chances, about the difference between earning forgiveness and demanding it, about building something meaningful with integrity instead of ego. Connor has 4 years left on his sentence. When he gets out, Harrison Tech Solutions will have a job waiting for him, not as CEO but as a junior engineer. He'll have to earn his way up, the way he should have from the beginning. That's justice, that's family. That's how you rebuild trust one choice at a time. If this story touched you, I'd appreciate it if you'd share it, and subscribe to hear more stories about second chances, hard-earned wisdom, and what it really means to build something that lasts.